Welcome to Ethereal Virtual Summit 2020. I'm Yonah Hochhauser, and today I'm joined by Andy Bromberg, president and co-founder of CoinList. Andy, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
All right, so first, to start us off, Andy, tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got into blockchain.
Yeah, absolutely. So I got into crypto back about 2012, 2013. I was at Stanford studying math and computer science, and was really fortunate to have a professor named Balaji Srinivasan, who you might recognize the name. He went on to found 21 and then Earn.com, and then was the CTO of Coinbase after Coinbase bought Earn, and left there last year. And he was a professor at the time. He was teaching us, and after the class ended, a number of us kept spending time together, and he convinced us that Bitcoin was going to be a really big deal. And so it was 2012, 2013. We were candidly a little bit skeptical, but he really convinced us, and we ended up starting the Stanford Bitcoin group back then. So we spent a couple of years doing advocacy work for Bitcoin and building little projects and just trying to make stuff happen. And we ran up and down Sand Hill Road in Silicon Valley pitching VCs on Bitcoin and saying, you should get interested in this. This is going to be a big deal. Some of them bought in, some of them didn't. And that was really fun. And so I got into the space then. I ended up leaving school. I started a company in the media space called Wyre. And then I co-founded CoinList back in 2017 with the rest of my co-founders. And that's how we got started with this business today.
Mm-hmm, wow. And you mentioned you started CoinList. Seemingly by the name, I'm assuming you guys list coins, but maybe you guys do a little more than that. Tell me a little bit about what you guys do.
Yeah, we do a little more than that now, certainly. So when we first launched, our focus was on running token sales for the world's best crypto projects. And the first one we ran was Filecoin, which was obviously a massively successful token sale, and they're going live later this year, which we're really excited about. And for the past 2.5 years, our biggest focus has been exactly that. It's been our token sale business. So we've run token sales for a lot of the best projects, from Filecoin to Nervos to Algorand to Solana, and many others in between. And we've really focused on quality, working with fewer than a dozen out of more than 3,500 that have approached us. So really selective, and we try and help them with that. Since then, we've launched a bunch more products, and the biggest one to date is our trading business. And so we now have the CoinList Trade Exchange, where you can go on and you can buy and sell Bitcoin, Ethereum, Algorand, Orchid just got added this week, USDC and a US dollar fiat on-ramp. And we're adding more and more assets to that, building out that interface and scaling the trading business. The two pillars of our business are token sales and trading. And on the trading front, more and more launching every single day. And that's really exciting. On the token sales front, we just ran the Solana token sale about a month and a half ago now. We've got the Celo token sale coming up in 4 days, Monday night, Tuesday morning. And more to come.
Mm-hmm. Now, you guys mentioned that you're pretty selective with the token sales. So you said you ran about 12 of them. Which of those sales was the most challenging for you guys, and why?
It's an interesting question. Every sale is challenging in its own way, and I think that's part of what we've grown to appreciate, is that these projects are all so unique. And I think back in 2017, it felt a little bit like everyone was just doing the same thing. It was rinse and repeat, and everyone followed the same model. Since then, people have wildly diverged. So sometimes we run fixed price token sales, and the biggest push is just how to get people involved and how do you build kind of momentum for the token sale to be successful. Sometimes we're running Dutch auctions and really complicated token sale structures. And when we're doing that, sometimes the challenge is communicating that to users. And how do you make people understand a structure that is economically really efficient and beneficial, but from a kind of simplicity point of view, maybe not a 10 out of 10, and takes a little bit of work to do. And sometimes they're on really tight timelines. And so, I would just say, I don't know if there's been one that's been the most challenging. They've all had their own issues. And, our view has always been that with each one that we run, we're going to get better at doing these things and be more and more efficient. And I think that's borne out to be true. You make mistakes sometimes, and we've made fewer and fewer over time. And we are now just kind of, it feels like a well-oiled machine, just spinning these projects out.
Well, you guys mentioned you guys started in 2017, and you mentioned that in 2017, it seemed like everyone was kind of doing the same thing. But, token sales are definitely not what they used to be, especially when you're looking back to that ICO boom of 2017. You guys are still doing token sales, but are token sales still a thing?
Yeah, we get that question a lot, and it's a good one. Token sales are definitely still a thing, and the way I think about this is that in 2017 there were a ton of token sales. It was a crazy boom time, but the reality was that 95% of them, maybe 99% of them, maybe more than that, they weren't good. They were garbage, and some of that was because they were overt scams and frauds. There were certainly a number of those. Some of that was just because they were tokens that didn't really need to exist, and people were still kind of sussing out what the use cases for tokens were, and they were well-intentioned teams, but launching projects that maybe didn't make a lot of sense, and everything in between. And so in 2017, there were a few good projects in our eyes and a ton of bad ones. And today what we've seen is that it's actually about the same number of great projects as there were in 2017, launching every, if we look at it on kind of a year by year basis, we've ran about the same number of token sales every year, in fact, increasing a little bit since 2017. So we think the number of high quality projects is going out. But what happened is the bottom 95, 99% of the market disappeared. So it looks like the market has gotten a lot smaller. In our view, we were only ever working with those high quality projects. And so the market's consistent or even a little bit bigger than it was in 2017. The one way to think about this is that, and this is how we think about it internally, is that it's not really the same market. There's a market for really high quality token sales, and then there's a market for garbage shitcoins and bad ICOs. And those are just two very different things. They're not even kind of worth considering in the same breath. And the transition from 2017 is that good token sale market has grown a little bit from 2017, and the bad token sale market has gone nearly to zero. There's still some out there, but nearly to zero. And so from that perspective, we would actually say token sales are doing quite well. And just a few data points on that. I mean, we ran the Algorand and the Nervos sales last year. Those were really big sales. Algorand raised $60 million. Nervos raised 72. We just ran the Solana token sale. They offered a really limited supply of tokens and sold that auction out. Like I said, we've got the Celo token sale coming up. We've got a full pipeline going into the next few months. And so, yeah, I certainly think token sales are still a thing.
Now, you mentioned that while there still is that same high quality of projects with the token sales nowadays, you're just not hearing about all those shit coins that were obviously, overrunning the market in 2017. But, one of the big knocks against, kind of the ICO model, the kind of token sale model, is that even if it is a good project that you do believe in, that has a great use case, what you're buying with the tokens isn't equity. What you're buying with the tokens is hopefully, if it's utility token, actual utility, but essentially you're buying, the team's word that you're going to get value back for it. Isn't that still a flawed model? Even if it is a good project, wouldn't an investor want to get something more harder than just a token?
Well, yeah, I think that speaks to almost exactly what we see the dividing line is between good projects and the not so good projects. I think a lot of those not so good projects, like you're saying, maybe they're building a compelling product, but at the end of the day, the token just doesn't really need to exist. And if I was interested in that product, I just want equity in that product. And I think the great token projects are projects where the system actually needs a token. And not only does the system need a token, there's really not a good concept of equity. So, I mean, you think of Bitcoin or Ethereum as kind of the two of the obviously most successful token projects out there, blockchain projects out there, numbers 1 and 2 by market cap. There's no company that makes sense to hold equity in to get exposure to the growth of that. Now, sure, there's companies that benefit on a second order effect from the growth of Bitcoin or Ethereum, and maybe you want equity in those. Certainly, Coinbase has done quite well off the growth of Bitcoin. And so would I like Coinbase equity? Yeah, but that doesn't mean that I don't want to own Bitcoin, right? Because the key there is that the value is accruing to that decentralized network. And I think the best token projects, that's what's happening, where ideally there's no entity where it even makes sense to own equity in, but the token itself is accruing value. And when we look at teams and evaluate these projects, usually, we can knock out a lot of projects from contention for listing on CoinList really quickly. Just, it's not a high quality project. The team doesn't look good. They're not building something compelling. So that's really easy to knock those off. But then the question that's always the hardest one to answer when it's otherwise a appealing project is that token economic model. Will value accrue to this token if the project is successful? And oftentimes, most often, the answer to that question is no. But when we can find one where the answer to that question is yes, where yes, value is likely to accrue to this token if the project is successful and we believe the project will be successful, those are the ones that we want to work with. Those are the ones we want to partner with. And that's what we really think separates a great project from one that's not so good.
Mm-hmm. Now, CoinList, you guys are doing a lot of this vetting. Like you mentioned, you guys look into the coin economics and see if it's kind of worth even selling at all. But that's in the private side. That's what you guys are taking care of. Now, the ICO, 2017 used to be a total free-for-all, total shit show, and a lot of investors got burnt as a result. Do you feel that besides, the vetting that you guys are doing, that there's, actual regulation, government regulation that's in place to kind of create an environment of trust between companies that want to sell tokens and their investors?
Regulation's getting there. I would say the regulation is not totally in place yet for this space that makes sense. And we're making strides and things are moving in different directions, but I don't think right now the regulation is what is making investors comfortable. I think what's making investors more comfortable and protecting them more is that they've now got some data points. They've now seen projects that have succeeded and failed. In 2017, and if you were looking into token sales in 2017, nobody had a track record, right? There were a very limited number of what we would call today tokens out there. You had no sense for what would be successful and what wouldn't. And I think doing that diligence that investors need to do was just really hard at that point, because how do you do that without any data on what's working and what's not? You try to reason from first principles, and that's good sometimes. And certainly some investors did really well out of doing that in 2017, but it's hard. And I think now we've gotten a couple more years of data. Investors getting more and more comfortable understanding what's the marker of a good project, what's the marker of a bad project. How do I make sure that I'm betting on the right horses here? And I think that's only going to get better over time. We're a couple of years into this token sale or token concept here. And as a reminder, I feel like I have to remind myself of this every single day. We're a decade into crypto as we know it existing at all. And that's a short timeline for anyone to be looking at data points in the past. And so, as we get further and further out in that timeline stretches, we've had more time to see what works, evaluate different projects, evaluate, how things win and lose in different economic times. That's a really important piece, right? Bitcoin has only been around since 2009. And that has not seen full economic cycles. We haven't seen how these assets respond through a range of conditions. And so as we get more and more data on that, I think it becomes easier and easier for investors to do their diligence, and better and better projects will rise to the top. But yeah, to your point, it was a messy time in 2017 because there was no regulation. And not only was there no regulation, there were no data points for investors to look at and, have a basis for making those smart decisions on their own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, it is an infancy, this technology, and especially this idea of tokenization. And I think that the token ecosystem, the token industry has really evolved. We're starting to see some really cool concepts, some new token ideas. And I want to get your thoughts on that, because you've kind of seen, all the range of tokens at this point. What are your thoughts on people kind of tokenizing themselves? The famously Brooklyn Nets player Spencer Dinwiddie, who was trying to, they didn't let it through, but he's attempting to tokenize his NBA contract, which is a novel idea. You spoke recently, or you just said how some things you can't really get equity in them. And this is a cool idea of someone taking something that has actual value and kind of offering investors a unique investment product.
Yeah, no, I think that personal tokenization of unusual assets ideas is interesting. I think there's pros and cons there, and I'm kind of eagerly watching and seeing how these first few sort themselves out. Because I think starting with the con side, perhaps, why would you not do this? First of all, regulation for doing things like this is tough in the first place. And then you layer on you're doing it with crypto, which is being looked at skeptically by a lot of regulators. And that just makes it even a little bit harder. And you've also got this question of, well, do you need a token to do this? Or could you effectively offer that same product of kind of seeing upside in myself through non-token ways? And there's plenty of history of that. There's this income share agreement concept that's that's been around for a long time, but it's really gained some prominence in the last couple of years. A number of startups have used that. There's been all sorts of ideas about buying upside in someone pre-crypto. So I think there's some headwinds to come over there in terms of the regulation and in terms of the question of whether you want to use a token for these things, because people forget sometimes building a token is really hard. And again, it's new, and so sometimes using a centralized system is just way more effective and easier and less error prone than building a token. So that's on the con side. But on the pro side, I think what's interesting is that crypto has built this concept in people's minds of being able to trade and exchange and do interesting financial things with digital assets. And before this, there just wasn't that much of that. Yeah, of course, there were video game currencies that you could buy and sell online, and there have been some digital asset exchanges that really brought this to the forefront. And if it's possible under the constraints that I was just talking about to do some of these things and to tokenize yourself or represent different unusual assets in a token form, it may be that because crypto has pioneered or really driven this future of financial services for digital assets, that it could be the natural place for those things. And that now it's much easier to trade because there's these digital asset exchanges already that are predicated on crypto. And so I'm excited to see if that happens. There's all sorts of interesting products that can get layered on top of something like a personal token. And it would be very cool if the kind of rails that we've built to support these pure decentralized cryptocurrencies end up also being the best rails to exchange something that's maybe a little bit more centralized by definition, like a token that's based on a single person's earnings. So yeah, I'm watching closely. It feels like early days. I'm really just excited that people are trying this and putting themselves out there. It's a big courageous thing to go out there and say, I'm tokenizing myself, buy upside in me. This is a totally new thing. I don't know if it'll work or not. And so I applaud the pioneers out there that are giving it a shot.
Yeah, someone who made headlines recently, Alex Mazgmig, he raised more than $20,000 selling his personalized AX token. That's on the personal token side, which is cool. I'm also watching. That'd be very cool if that takes off. But I think something more apropos or more appropriate for tokenization is personalized data. Because right now, some of the most valuable companies in the world are ones who are powered by our data. Like looking at Facebook, Google. I mean, these are some of those valuable companies in the world. And they're essentially monetizing the data they collect on us. So, one of the big promises for blockchain, for crypto, is this kind of decentralization of power, putting the power back into the people, into the individual. Do you think that there is a future in individuals kind of taking back the power of their own data and monetizing it through the use of personal data tokens?
Yes, and I don't know how we get there, but I am excited to see people working on it. I think, everything you're saying is right on. I think the winds, the secular tailwinds are pointing that way and saying, people are starting to realize that there's this censorship that exists out there, there's surveillance that exists out there, there's these privacy violations. It feels like month by month, those narratives are getting stronger and stronger. And I think that makes people want to take back control of their data, take back control of their privacy and start to exercise their rights there. I think what's challenging is, I just don't know who's going to solve that, how it's going to happen, what exactly it's going to look like, because there's a lot of related concepts there around, monetizing your own data is one piece of it, but also just protecting your own data is another. Yet another is portability of your data and, not relying on data that you've stored in centralized services that might go down temporarily or permanently. So there's this network of related ideas. It feels like there's something there. It feels like crypto may be able to play a role in it. And I've certainly got some ideas, but I don't know how we actually get there and what that ultimate state looks like.
Mm-hmm. And on that same vein, your company is backed by Jack Dorsey, CEO of Square and Twitter. And he's a famous friend to Bitcoin. I mean, he's a big pro. He's always showing his love on Twitter for cryptocurrencies, for Bitcoin. Has he been hands-on at all and kind of talking to you about his vision for the future of blockchain and crypto, or kind of hands-on, in the actual company?
Yeah, so he's I mean, the guy's running two public companies, so he's a busy man, and he's also right now doing incredible things, working to fight against coronavirus and making all sorts of efforts. So he's doing a lot of good for the world every single day. He's been really thoughtful and is certainly opinionated about where this space is going, what's going to work and what's not going to work. And he's paying close attention. And you know, we were incredibly happy overjoyed to bring him on board as an investor and a stakeholder in CoinList. And he's just been really, really helpful to us. But yeah, day to day operationally, now he's focused on these kind of big ticket items that are, world changing on a truly transnational scale every single day. And I think he's looking at crypto and saying, this feels like this is going to be one of those things. And so he's, I think making bets in hopefully teams that he likes and projects that he likes, things he sees upside in, to try to, stay abreast of that and be involved as the space continues to grow.
And obviously he likes what he sees in CoinList so far. And you mentioned that, kind of the two pillars was that coin listing, but as well as that trading. You guys recently got involved in WBTC. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, this is actually one of the things we're most excited about right now. So for those that don't know, WBTC is wrapped Bitcoin, and it is a representation of Bitcoin on the Ethereum blockchain. So why is this interesting? Well, all of these DeFi products, decentralized finance products, are being built on Ethereum, whether it's something like Compound, where you can lend and borrow assets and earn interest or pay to get a loan, or it's something like Set Protocol that allows you to construct portfolios, or anything at MakerDAO, allowing you to build these, create CDPs and get DAI and build this and support the stablecoins. There's all these DeFi products that are being built on Ethereum. And Bitcoin is a really valuable collateral type for this. There's a lot of people out there that have Bitcoin. There's a lot of wealth stored in Bitcoin. And how cool would it be if you could lend your Bitcoin on Compound, or you could back a CDP for MakerDAO with Bitcoin? Well, that's what Wrap Bitcoin allows for. It's created by a bunch of great firms working together. And we just saw a gap in the market because it's a complicated product, and the minting and burning, the transitioning from Bitcoin to Wrap Bitcoin hard. It's hard to do for very good reasons. It's a complicated process. And so we said, well, listen, we're sitting here, we've got all these users, we've got all these people that trust us, and people want to move between Bitcoin and Wrap Bitcoin really easily. What if we just allowed them to swap, and we would handle the minting and burning on the back end? So we go and we do these big batch processes where we mint and burn lots of Bitcoin or Wrap Bitcoin, moving back and forth to keep it reserved. And then you, as any user, can come to CoinList and you can just hit a button. You can put in a Bitcoin or fraction of Bitcoin, whatever you want, hit the Wrap button and turn into the equivalent amount of Wrap Bitcoin, or you can unwrap and go the other direction. And we're just managing that on the back end and not actually forcing you to go through the mint and burn process. So that's, people have loved that. We've got an API for kind of higher volume traders and market makers that are doing that. We've got a retail interface. If you just go to coinlist.co and sign in and deposit a Bitcoin, you can wrap it and unwrap it and use it for whatever you want. And we're really excited about the DeFi ecosystem and the wave that's happening there. It really seems to be picking up steam. And we just saw a gap where, we love Bitcoin, and we think, it should be able to be used in these products. And we love the Wrap Bitcoin concept, and we're able to use our position and our infrastructure to make that even easier. And last week, I mentioned MakerDAO started allowing Wrap Bitcoin as collateral for multi-collateral DAI, which is a huge stride. We saw a big spike in activity after that. And we're expecting that ecosystem to keep growing. So we're really happy to be playing a small role there. And when I say a small role, I say small because Wrap Bitcoin is growing. It's still fairly small, but we are the largest minter of Wrap Bitcoin out there, and are really doing a lot of volume in terms of the overall activity in that space. So all right. Very excited about that.
And right before we have to let you go, our time is almost up. What is the next year? What's next for CoinList?
Next year for CoinList is, first of all, as always, supporting these great projects that we're working with. Like I said, full pipeline coming up in the next year of really high quality token sales, starting with Cello on early next week on Monday night. And then growing our trading business. Right now, it's a really simple retail style trading interface where you can just click buy and sell and move back and forth. We'll be rolling out our pro interface in the next couple of months with all sorts of fancy charting and more advanced features, listing more and more assets on there, and trying to figure out how else we can play in the DeFi ecosystem. What more can we do aside from WBTC to support great projects that are happening there. But there's a lot to do, a lot of opportunities in this space, and we are just trying to take advantage of as many as we can and be as supportive as possible to the world's best crypto projects.
Awesome. Really interesting stuff. Thank you, Andy, for taking the time. That's all the time we have. And, looking forward to seeing what next year brings for CoinList.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Have a good one.
You too.
All right. Next up, we have Jack Gia. Now, for those of you who are just joining us, who were not part of that latest conversation, welcome to the Ethereal Summit 2020. I am Yonah Hochhauser. I'm joined by Jack Gia, founding member and head of partnerships at Wyre. Jack, thanks for joining us.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
How's it going? Now, I know this is a little weird. Obviously this isn't how a crypto conference usually goes, but listen, the show must go on. Obviously the pandemic has us locked indoors, so I do appreciate you taking the time. So first up, as we start, tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got into the blockchain technology.
Yeah, for sure. So I had gone to Berkeley back in early 2010s. And afterwards, I, started my own startups, completely not in the space at all, just doing like smart hydraulics and early days AI, Internet of Things. And then I found out about Bitcoin in 2013 when I was working with Horizon in Hong Kong with Li Ka-shing, and he had just invested in BitPay. So I started looking into Bitcoin, and it was, really, because I had studied finance at Berkeley, it just made sense to me, and I wanted to switch. So here I am 6 years later. So.
Yeah, also it's a great time to get in. Now, you said, like you mentioned, you were really into it, and now you're one of the founding members of Wyre. Tell me how that kind of got started and what Wyre is.
Yeah, for sure. So, just a little bit of history. We've been in this space since 2013, and we've done a lot of things and kind of follow the market all along. Right? So, the first kind of a bull run to $1,200 back in 2013. A lot of kind of new crypto rich people wanted to spend it. So merchant processing was a big thing, right? That's why, BitPay worked with, Expedia or Microsoft and all these different big merchants. There was a lot of hype at that time, but, we basically started doing merchant processing as well and quickly found out that, it was more hype than real processing volume, and it wasn't a real viable kind of business model. So we quickly switched to doing wallets. And this was in 2015. And it was a pivotal moment for us because, there was a lot of, there's basically two approaches, right? You can take the non-custodial wallet approach, or you can become kind of like an MSB, take custody of user funds in the Coinbase model and become like an MSB and offer like a hosted wallet. So we chose the latter, right? And rather than, kind of becoming like a bread wallet or an edge wallet, we became more like a Coinbase, right? And became more of an MSB, right? And then from doing that, I think it allowed us to, kind of create our own KYC AML program and all the compliance onboarding of end users and, helping them to go from their bank account to their, Snapcard wallet. At the time we were called Snapcard, starting out. So that was 2013, 2015. And then in 2016, we realized that if we combine the on-ramps and the off-ramps, we can actually do cross-border payments. So, when you do crypto merchant processing, you're taking in crypto and you're converting it to fiat. Right. When you do, like a wallet, when you're buying crypto, you're going from a bank, from fiat to crypto. Well, if you combine the two, you can go from fiat to crypto, and then, from crypto back to fiat in another market, and you have effectively, done a cross-border payment. And that's when we kind of rebranded to Wyre, obviously for wire transfers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, now that's the thing that drives me crazy. Okay, we're in 2020 with all the incredible technology, the internet, everything's connected, and yet at this point, traditionally, sending money around the world using traditional means is still slow and it's still expensive. And it drives me nuts because the technology is clearly there for us to do this much quicker and much cheaper. Yeah. Is cross-border payments, is this one of the best potential use cases for the blockchain and cryptocurrency?
Yeah, no, I would say so. I think it has proven to be one of the kind of proven use cases, right? Obviously, you have speculation and trading. And traders, even from Wall Street, Chicago now, all around the world, whether retail traders, the speculation and all the exchanges is part of the infrastructure that is within the crypto ecosystem. Whether you're doing it in a decentralized manner or a centralized manner, trading is, has proven to be a very useful use case. The second kind of runner-up would definitely be remittance, right, or cross-border payments, right? And because the thing is we have financial technology that is very kind of ancient and antiquated, right? So like, for example, Swift as a messaging network was built in the 70s, right? And all the different banks are still kind of using this messaging protocol for how they do cross-border settlements. Right? And it's, even if you're a TransferWise or like an OFX or any kind of new kind of fintech player, you're still building like basically like an interface on legacy tech, right? So, something like Bitcoin or Ethereum or stablecoins, right? It completely disrupts that entirely because what you're saying is under the hood, you're basically switching out the legacy financial kind of infrastructure for something completely new. That takes like 30 seconds to reconcile on chain, right? When I send USDC from Europe to US, it's 30 seconds later, it's already in the US, and then you can use the local banking system to basically settle the payment from end to end, right? Because when you're a nation and you have a Federal Reserve and you're running like your own kind of real-time settlement schemes within a country, that's relatively efficient, right? If I send money from using, let's say, a Zelle from like Wells Fargo to Bank of America, that'll get there instantly because there's a Federal Reserve that does the settlement for this nation. Same thing if you're in Brazil or in Mexico or in China, right? If I send money from China Merchant Bank to China Construction Bank, it'll get there like in under a minute because these are centralized systems. It's pretty efficient. But when you have that cross-border element where there isn't like a true interoperability between nations beyond this kind of Swift messaging network, that's where crypto can definitely help, and it's already proven itself, right? So, for example, like between Hong Kong and South Korea and Philippines and Indonesia and Singapore, there's a lot of migrant workers there, right? And under the hood, once again, you're using something like a stablecoin or Bitcoin to move the value from nation to nation, and then once again leveraging that local payment network or banking network for settlements. So yeah, that's definitely a great use case for crypto.
Mm. Yeah, like as you speak about it, as you mention it, anyone who really understands the technology, I mean, it's pretty clear that it is vastly superior to legacy networks like Swift, things that were just so outdated. So and the question is this: what is really holding back the major financial system from kind of switching over, especially for cross-border remittances, cross-border transactions, any of these things? What is stopping them? Is it the bad rep kind of that crypto gets as the means of money for criminals, which has been proven to be false? Is it kind of, hey, they know that old system, it's safe and they don't want to mess with it, or is it that they're profiting just fine with the system as it is?
Yeah, I would say all of the above in a way, right? Because there's a certain habituation into the old tech, and then there's a certain fear or uncertainty with anything that's new. Right. And also they are profiting from it, right? When you go from, let's say, US dollar to Mexican peso through your bank, right, they will charge, 9% on the FX, right? And they'll charge you, $50 to $100 on the wire transfer fees. So yeah, that's a huge kind of revenue center for banks. So there's not really an incentive there. And these are massive organizations. Even if you have some crypto heads within a bank that wants to push for this, right? The kind of gray hair, the silver hair guys, that can't wrap their heads around this, are the decision makers, and it ultimately takes a very long time. So, I would just be patient with it. We have new generations who understand this, and we're, going to be taking positions soon in the coming years. And, it's just a matter of time, right? In this 1 decade that we've already had in how we bootstrap liquidity to get the network going, it's already very impressive where we are, right? The fact that, you have different institutions on Wall Street and Chicago even legitimizing this as an asset class and trading it, that's a great thing, right? And you have, other bigger corporations like Square and Jack Dorsey or Facebook with Libra. For what it's worth, obviously there's some discrepancies between the purists and something like a Libra and all the privacy and all the control that they have. But the point is that something like a Facebook has this on their radar. And even like, for example, Samsung, right? They have a Samsung blockchain SDK, and you literally have a crypto wallet on your phone natively offered by the phone manufacturer. Like that's like, who would have imagined that 5 years ago even, right? So yeah.
Well, I want to pick your brain a little bit more on that, because I really do think that it's really crucial to the blockchain and crypto sphere right now, where big players, big traditional players, or at least tech players like Facebook with their project Libra, like you mentioned, they're trying to get into blockchain, into crypto. do you think big tech getting into blockchain is good for the industry? It does, like you mentioned, you had that on your Samsung phone. Everyone has, that blockchain-enabled phone. It's good for max adoption, and hopefully, I pray for good UIUX finally to come to crypto, or will they spoil it for us purists? Will they make it kind of too corporate? And also on that, Libra, specifically with Facebook and Libra, they're getting a lot of negative attention from regulators when they first announced it. So will that kind of bring the bad eye of the law down onto the crypto sphere?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I'm personally kind of conflicted over this. I understand both sides of the argument, right? It's like public blockchains have been the only blockchain that has seen any success, right? And you see what Ethereum is doing, and within the DeFi ecosystem, just how quickly we're innovating and experimenting. You have some security issues obviously here and there. Whether it's the IOTA hack, or if it's the D-Force copy paste of Compound that didn't go very well, or just other kind of relayers that might have some security concerns. But at the end of the day, I think public blockchains is where all the innovation and experimentation is happening. So I definitely want to kind of keep things pure in that sense. But there's also like a pragmatic side to this, right? It's like, dude, like Facebook has 5 billion users. Like that's, if you think of it as kind of like a proxy educational Trojan horse, if you will, right? Even if the introduction of Libra to the mind and hearts of every single person on planet Earth, even if that is kind of, counter principle to what, Bitcoin or Ethereum is, it still can serve as like a proxy educational process. Once again, you have to think about it in stages, right? Like either way, these kind of bigger organizations are going to get involved. And yes, it would be nice if they just build on top of Ethereum. Well, they're not going to. So what are you going to do? You're going to pout about it? Or are you going to say, well, the bright side of this is they do have 5 billion users. They are educating them about something like blockchain and crypto, right? And that kind of speeds up the educational process and the penetration of the market, right? So in a way, it's like, if they're going to do it anyways, if China is going to create a digital currency electronic payment system and create their own kind of closed loop blockchain, right? If US has Libra, and these things are going to happen either way, right? Can they coexist alongside each other during this developmental stage, right? In this next 5 to 10 years. So yeah, in a way, it's a good thing, I think, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you did mention kind of these public blockchains, like Bitcoin and Ethereum. And it's interesting because these are the two biggest blockchains in terms of community and market cap, depending how you want to value it. But they're kind of separate. And there's various projects of trying to make them, act nice with each other and wrap Bitcoins and things like that. But do you view them as competitors, or do they really complement each other because they're kind of both so important that eventually they're going to, products, they're going to kind of have to be able to kind of have cross-chain functionality and cross-transactions between them? Is that inevitable, or do you see, them kind of standing as separate blockchains?
Yeah, once again, we have to refer back to kind of historical development, right? Early on, everyone was a Bitcoin maximalist because the entire crypto community were Bitcoiners. There was, if you look at, once again, the hash rate or the kind of how many people are actually using any chain, in 2013, 80% was Bitcoin, right? There was nothing else. So everyone got into crypto from Bitcoin, right? And then at some point, the community split and splintered into different factions, if you will, right? And the Bitcoin maximalists are, I think they're arguing honestly, mostly on monetary policy and economic kind of principles, right? And there's on a political sense, right? Both sides are libertarian, I would argue, because it's like, hey, we don't want state-controlled money. We want kind of this free open source money, right? And I will say that there's more agreement than disagreement, but just over time, it developed in such a way that there's, factions now and they're kind of bumping heads. But, personally for me, I am a Bitcoin maximalist at heart, but I am super empathetic to what's happening in Ethereum, and I respect everything that's happening there. I understand it, right? So I think some of the Bitcoin maximalists, they almost like have a dismissive attitude towards what's happening in Ethereum, and they don't dive deeply into Ethereum enough to understand its value or the doing like a cost benefit analysis to see what is good and what is bad. And obviously you do have some scam coins where you can argue that that was for experimentation and it didn't work. Or you can say, hey, these were just, arbitrageurs or people that were kind of exploiting, people. And yes, there's a good case for that. But still there's good things happening in Ethereum. Like for example, if you try to use a Bitcoin wallet versus something like a Formatic, right, or a Unilogin, or the interface for how you interact with your non-custodial asset, like there's no comparison, right? Like Bitcoin wallets are so backwards at this point that they can actually learn a few things from the Ethereum community, right? And they're very different chains, obviously. Like Bitcoin is not trying to do anything with smart contracts at all. Maybe something like a Liquid network through Blockstream, creating like a side chain where you can, do more kind of smart contract stuff. But at the end of the day, obviously that all falls within the Ethereum space, and I think there's things that Ethereum heads can learn about or can learn from Bitcoin as well. Because, if you look at the way that Bitcoin bootstrap liquidity, right, all these kind of new tokens can learn a lot from that, on how they successfully grew to a massive project. But yeah, I mean, mutual respect to both of them. I'm at heart I am a Bitcoin maximalist because I believe in we're talking money, so monetary policy ultimately informs how things go, more so than the functionality. If you had to pick one, but just the sheer amount of things you can do on ETH is just mind blowing.
Yeah. Now monetary policy might be more important than functionality, but something that's driving me crazy because listen. Is UIUX, is usability. Now, it matters less, for kind of tech nerds like me and you, but it's kind of, it hurts me when I want to, I talk about crypto. I'm all excited to my parents, my grandparents, but it's hard to bring them in because, a lot of projects, especially with Bitcoin, but overall across the board, the UIUX is just not there when it comes to traditional tech. When will blockchain solutions be as easy to use as traditional applications, such as Venmo? You guys are Wyre. You guys are in the money transferring game. When it comes to Venmo, hey, I don't have to worry. I have my friend. I press a button. He gets it. There's no wallets to open. There's no other issues. When will blockchain be as easy as a click of a button?
Yeah, in a way, I would argue that we're already there with at the UIUX level from several teams. CoinList is one of them. Dharma. If you use Dharma's iOS or Android app, it's amazing, right? It's so in a sense, we're already there at the UIUX level. For example, there's a company called Taurus, TOR.US. Right? They allow like Web2 credentials to log into like a Web3, right? So you can literally use your Google or a Facebook account to create like a wallet and interact with the wallet. So in a way, we're already there. But it has more to do with penetration than anything else, right? Like Venmo has already reached critical mass, right? So everyone's already on Venmo with their friends, right? Facebook has already reached critical mass. So everyone's already on there, right? So in a way, we're trying to attribute the fact that there hasn't been like adoption to certain problems and calling it UI, UX and whatever it might be. But I would argue that, UI, UX is already there. And there's other reasons as to why we haven't gone that deep market penetration yet. And once again, it has a lot to do with how you bootstrap liquidity, right? If Facebook already has those users, to reach out to those users on Facebook is not a bad deal, right? So, abridged.io, right? They're creating DAOs on Discord, on Telegram, right? There's already millions of users on there. Why wouldn't you go there to get them to use crypto in a seamless manner, right? So yeah, I think it has a lot to do with almost like a mindset on how you approach business because, traditionally you're building your company and you're trying to get your users and you're trying to, make really good UI, UX on your platform, right? Well, with open source tech and with crypto, it's like, it's money Legos, right? It's a resilient network where perhaps you shouldn't try to do everything yourself because Compound already created money markets or Maker already has created a stable coin. And, why do you try to recreate everything yourself when you can just take these pieces and stitch together fairly quickly, in a secure manner and slap some, good UI, UX over it. And it helps to speed things up. And that's what I'm personally really excited about DAOs because, it aligns incentives to bring different teams together in a resilient network so that we can all move faster than like a traditional company that is, doing things by themselves and trying to get their own users, right? We're trying to get users into crypto, but what does that mean? Is it through your interface, or can it be through like Facebook or Discord, but it still interacts with Compound and Maker? So, yeah.
All right. And, one of the reasons why we're speaking over the internet and not face-to-face is obviously, this COVID-19 pandemic, which has shut down the movement of people. But, and it's also shut down a lot of businesses as well. The people who are dealing kind of in the physical realm, the physical world has kind of been, is kind of been choked to a standstill right now. But on the other end, it's really highlighted the use for kind of working remotely, remote conferences like this. Do you think, kind of that this pandemic that kind of created a little shift in how we value certain aspects of life? Do you think that this is highlighted, certain use cases, especially in the DeFi space? Do you think that that this crazy situation we're in, once in a lifetime situation, that, kind of there's new opportunities for DeFi solutions to these very unique problems?
Yeah, I mean, overall, yes, right? Because I think the whole situation in this kind of paradigm shift, we're going from era to era, 2008 to 2020 now, and going into this next era, is super bullish for big tech and crypto, right? Because for on the big tech standpoint, it's like you can't go shop anymore, and I have to get delivery from Amazon Fresh. So it's super bullish for big tech. And then from a crypto standpoint, it's like the macro kind of risks involving the legacy financial system is such that it makes more sense to have $1 on the blockchain than to have $1 in your bank that might literally default, right? And it's already been 10 years of education, and a lot of people are starting to understand the value of crypto, right? And you have regional issues too, right? So for example, in Argentina, you have a super volatile local currency, and there's a team called AirTM that offers DAI as a stablecoin within their kind of interface that allows local Argentinians to have a dollar, right? And before they were trying to get paper dollars, and now they don't need to, right? So as the world kind of becomes more volatile in this era, it's definitely going to help crypto a lot, because everyone's on their phones now. Everyone's at home on their laptop and phones, so you're interacting with this kind of virtual space more. Right, and there's less human interaction and more kind of virtual interaction. So for big tech and crypto, that's going to help a lot, I think. And I'm not sure if it highlighted any specific use cases beyond the ones that are already proven and developing. But I do think that it simply doubles down on what's already happening in the space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's take a question from the viewers. We have Chaim Bender, who he was asking, what's the current transaction value for cross-border payments in crypto? And how much is Swift? I'm assuming Swift is way higher. I mean, but he wants to know kind of how much right now. Where are we at in terms of cross-border payments in crypto? And if you can derive Ethereum valuation for this value.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. That's a good question. So I think right now, literally the volume for cross-border payments that goes through crypto rails versus traditional rails, literally that's at like 0.01%. Literally, right? And there's a lot of reasons for that. Once again, cross-border payments is comprised of a lot of different things, right? So you have the P2P remittance, right? I'm working in California, and I need to send $1,000 back home to my family in Mexico, right? That's $30 billion just in that rail, right? And from US to Mexico. And then you have, B2B payments, right? The Walgreens needs to buy hand sanitizers from Mexican factories, right? That's a whole another order of magnitude of volume compared to P2P remittance, right? And then you have, all the kind of high net worth individuals who move money around, and all the different kind of post-trade settlements with different assets across different markets, right? It's insane how much money moves around the world, right? You think about the assets and the value of those assets, and the movement of value, right? So it's like if you have $120 trillion in assets, and then if there's any trades happening with those assets, all of that is going to the legacy financial system. So yes, like the total addressable market for what crypto can do for cross-border payments is huge. And right now we're still nowhere, even though it is a proven use case relative to itself, right? Where, like I'm saying, there's a lot of resilient remittance networks in Southeast Asia and in Latin America, right? And even for Wyre, we've done a lot of cross-border payments on the B2B side, right? Where a business in the UK needs to send money to the US to do mass payouts because they're a multinational corporation that has 10,000 employees here, right? And we do a lot of USD payouts, for off-ramps. And there's a bunch of Korean money transfer companies that use Wyre's API as well for mass payouts, and they give us $1 million and they pay $1,000 to 1,000 people, right? So there's definitely, and all of that goes through crypto rails, right? On our backend, we're going USD buy BTC, BTC sell to MXN or BRL, whatever it might be. So so we are contributing to that volume, and then you have things like Ripple or XLM. Stellar's entire mandate is to do like $5 billion a year in volume on the Stellar network in remittance, right? For remittance, for cross-border payments. So, there are teams working on this, but, if you compare to later on, we're still nowhere. We're still at 0.01%. If you compare us to ourselves over this past 10 years, we've done quite well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, and it's interesting because when you're dealing with the money, like you said, these numbers are staggering when it comes to sending money across borders. Is blockchain technology, there yet? It's still so new. We're really in infancy in terms of the technology. Are we still working out the kinks in the technology, or can we feel secure to kind of send and exchange that volume? If tomorrow, the traditional legacy, system said, hey, we want to send all these 30 billion on blockchain, is it there yet to handle it?
Yeah, I mean, to a degree, it depends on which venue you send it to, right? And this is the issue that, for example, that Ripple might have with some of their banking partners, where the banking partner doesn't want to send $30 billion to like an exchange that is, pseudo-regulated, if you will, right? So, but on the other hand, if you send money to Grayscale or to any of the OTC desks in New York or Chicago, those are all counterparty relationships that have already been established. They simply created a crypto division within this bigger kind of trading firm, and you are able to send hundreds of millions of dollars to these different counterparties. So in a way, once again, it has to do with developmental stages, right? So to a degree, the stage that we're at right now is bridging between the legacy financial system to crypto. It's a one-way street, right? Once we're on this new system completely, then there is no need for that kind of interoperability between, your bank account and your MetaMask wallets, right? But we're not at that stage yet. So at this present stage, it's very important to think about, how do you work with the Facebooks, and with for example, Wyre, we have a widget and an API that allows you to go from Apple Pay, Google Pay, and Samsung Pay to Bitcoin, Ethereum, USDC, and DAI, and you can ship it to your non-custodial wallet, right? That interoperability between the Web 2 and Web 3, if you will, right, is the current stage that we're at, and it's not there yet. We're never gonna, it's perpetually developing, right? And even when we're fully on the blockchain, like 100%, there's still going to be development that makes it more and more resilient. So I think we kind of at this stage just need to huddle up, right? And I think Wyre even thinks of ourselves as like part of that money Lego system. And even though part of us is centralized, we're taking care of the compliance onboarding and the money transmission and all the not fun stuff that's off chain to port a user into, something like a USDC or DAI, right? And then also, compliantly offboard them when they need to come back to their bank account for whatever reason, right? And a miner might need to sell to cover operating costs, whatever it is. So at this state that we're at right now, I think, it's important to think about that as far as working within the existing system to help port it over to purely natively on blockchain.
And we're running out of time. Last question: when do you see that happening? When is it going to be purely natively on the blockchain? When are we not even going to be asking any of these questions of, hey, how was it play nice? When will all cross-border payments be on the blockchain?
Oh man, I think Ethereum people might not want to admit this, but because Bitcoin was first, it's spearheading at least on the trading side in terms of volume, and it lifts all tides, right? So there's a certain equation that follows with the halving, 6 months before and 6 months after the halving. So I think hyper Bitcoinization will lead the way to kind of like hyper tokenization, if you will, right? And it kind of builds alongside each other. The Bitcoin teams are going to keep on doing what they do, and the Ethereum team's going to keep on doing what they do, and they're both kind of bring the world to that place where everything is on the blockchain, whether that means, Libra or central bank, or if it means, open ledgers like Bitcoin and Ethereum. I'm an optimist. So I think like within this next 5 to 10 years, we'll completely get there, because things are happening in kind of like the geopolitical setting that's accelerating the timeline. But yeah, I mean, roughly estimate probably 10 to 15 years. Yeah, it's definitely happening. Like, yeah, but we're gonna get there. So this is the future. So internet value.
That's exciting, Jack. Thank you so much for joining us, filling us all in on kind of what's going on behind the scenes at Wyre. I appreciate you taking the time. And for all our people who came and checked out this speech, thanks very much. I'm Yonah Hochhauser. Peace.
See you guys.